Welcome back to Retro Gamer Gen X's Retro Gaming and Computing channel. When people talk about legendary handheld devices, they usually talk about Nintendo and they get all the credit. But by the early 2000s, Sony had stepped into the ring with something wildly ambitious and just an amazing product, and that was the Sony Portable PlayStation, or better known as the PSP. This was a device that allowed you to not only take your games on the go, but you could take your music and your videos with you as well, which was vastly different than any other handheld on the market at the time. So in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Sony PSP, who was behind it, the technology inside of it, all the different models, and why this console is still relevant more than 2 decades later. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the Sony PSP.
PSP, huh?
Yeah.
Sweet! That thing morphs. That's more. Oh, it will morph. It's morphing. That morphed. It morphed. That's it. Square, square. Dude, you can shoot that thing? Shoot that thing. Force field. Get the force field. Get up in there and shoot that. Drop a cluster bomb. Cluster bomb. Bash the tree. No. Cluster bombs. Cluster bomb. Ugh.
Dude, get your own. PSP, now $169.99. PSP.
The story of the Sony PlayStation Portable really starts in the early 2000s. Sony was riding high. The original PlayStation had changed the industry, and the Sony PlayStation 2 was on its way to becoming the best-selling console of all time. But there was one space that Sony had seriously not cracked yet, and that was handheld gaming. Nintendo absolutely dominated the market with the Game Boy line. Attempts from other companies like Neo Geo with the Neo Geo Pocket or Nokia's N-Gage had come and gone. Sony saw an opportunity in the market share. Sony's vision wasn't just to make a competitor to the Game Boy, they wanted something bigger. Internally, Sony described the PSP as the Walkman of the 21st century. This wasn't just marketing talk. Sony wanted a single portable device that could play high-end games, movies, music, and even browse photos and the web. This was also before smartphones took over our pockets. In the early 2000s, the idea of carrying a portable multimedia powerhouse actually made a lot of sense. Sony officially announced the PlayStation Portable in 2003, making it clear that this would be a full member of the PlayStation family, not a side experiment. Now before this, Sony had only dabbled in portable gaming, notably with the Pocket Station in 1999, but it hadn't seriously challenged Nintendo's dominance in handhelds, as the Pocket Station was more like the VMU on the Sega Dreamcast, more than it was like a Game Boy. The PSP was developed by Sony Computer Entertainment, the same internal division responsible for the PlayStation and the PlayStation 2. While Sony didn't spotlight individual engineers the same way some companies do, we do know the key figures that were involved. One of the most important names is Shinichi Ogasawara, who led the industrial design of the PSP. His team focused on creating a sleek, premium device that felt more like a consumer electronic than a toy, something that was different from what Nintendo was doing and their approach, marketing to kids. Sony first showed concept images of the PSP at E3 2003, but the actual hardware reveal didn't happen until May of 2004. When it finally appeared, it immediately stood out. Widescreen display, glossy piano black finish, and a layout that looked just like a mini PlayStation controller. By its launch, over 90 developers had already pledged support. That early confidence was huge and showed that Sony's PlayStation brand carried a lot of weight, even in handheld form. It was clear that the Sony PSP was way more powerful than the Game Boy at the time, so let's take a look under the hood and see what made this thing a performance monster. Now this is where the PSP really separated itself from anything else on the market. At its heart, the PSP used a dual-core MIPS-based processor running up to 333 MHz. One core handled general processing while the second was dedicated to multimedia tasks. a forward-thinking design for a handheld in 2004. The graphics hardware were equally impressive. The PSP could render real 3D graphics with lighting, textures, and effects that were closer to the PlayStation than anything Nintendo had on their handheld side at the time. Then there was the screen, a 4.3-inch widescreen LCD with a 480 by 272 resolution. For many players, this was the first handheld that felt truly cinematic. Sony also introduced the Universal Media Disc, or UMD. This proprietary optical disc allowed games and full-length movies to be distributed physically, something no other handheld had attempted, using a disk drive. On top of that, the PSP included Wi-Fi, USB connectivity, and multimedia playback, such as movies, music, and photos. The PSP wasn't just a gaming system, it was a pocket entertainment center, living up to how it was branded as the Walkman of the 21st century earlier in its development. The PSP launched in Japan on December 12, 2004. It was an instant hit, selling hundreds of thousands of units in the first days. North America followed in March of 2005, and Europe later in the same year. The system launched with strong titles like Ridge Racer, Wipeout Pure, and Loomies, games that showed off both speed and style. Critics praised the PSP's power, screen, and design, but it wasn't perfect. Battery life could be rough, especially when using UMD movies, and load times were noticeably longer than cartridge-based systems. Still, the PSP made a statement and entered handheld gaming into a whole new era. Over its life, Sony released several revisions of the PSP. The original PSP 1000 launched the platform and was heavier and had only 32 megabytes of RAM. Then they launched the PSP 2000, also known as the Slim and Light. It reduced weight and doubled the RAM to 64 megabytes, and it added TV out support. Next came the PSP 3000, which supposedly improved the screen, but some users complained about having artifacting while playing games, but it also included a built-in microphone. Sony then took its boldest step with the PSP Go, a smaller, sliding design that ditched the UMD entirely in favor of digital downloads. While ahead of its time, it was quite controversial because you didn't have physical media, and it never fully really caught on. Finally, the PSP Street was a budget model released only in Europe, removing features like Wi-Fi to cut costs. Each version of the PSP reflected Sony's experimenting with what handheld gaming would and could become. And how could we talk about the PSP and not talk about the hacking and homebrew community? One of the biggest reasons the PSP is still talked about today isn't just because of the games. It's the massive hacking and homebrew community that formed around it. Thanks to its powerful hardware and its relatively open architecture, hackers quickly found ways that they could run unsigned code on the PSP. This led to the creation of custom firmware, which completely changed what the system could do. With custom firmware installed, the PSP could run homebrew applications, fan-made games, utilities, media players, and most famously, emulators. Of course, custom firmware also made it possible to run pirated games, something Sony fought against for nearly the entire life of the system. Sony released constant firmware updates in an attempt to block exploits, patch vulnerabilities, and lock down the platform. It quickly turned into a cat and mouse game. Sony would patch one exploit, and the hacking community would find another. Hackers like Dark Alex became legendary in the scene, with custom firmware releases that were often more stable and feature-rich than Sony's official updates. In the end, Sony never fully won the battle. While piracy hurt software sales, the hacking scene also helped cement the PSP's long-term popularity and ensured the system would live far beyond its official support window. Also, it really kind of helped the sales of the system, and maybe that's why Sony kind of let it keep going on. Now, over its lifetime, the PSP sold over 80 million units worldwide, an enormous success for Sony's first true handheld. It proved that console-quality gaming on the go was possible. It helped shape digital distribution experiments, and it laid the groundwork for the PlayStation Vita. Even today, the PSP remains beloved, for its design, its library, and its ambition. It didn't just compete with Nintendo, it changed expectations for what handhelds could be.
Dear PlayStation, why aren't you talking about the PSP?
Actually,
These PSP games are the business, and I can't stand hearing these kids talking about some weak app on the phone.
games, phone,
They're getting hustled, KB.
hustle.
We need publicity for the PSP.
We're gonna do something about it.
PSP needs a hero.
Yeah.
A baller.
Yes.
Someone that ain't wearing a clip-on tie.
Huh?
We got good kids playing bad games.
You know what? You're onto something.
Mr. Butler's in my meeting right now. May I take a message?
So tell me, Marcus, why are you qualified for this position?
You know, KB, thing about me is, I know the PSP.
All right, just a couple of questions here. I gotta ask.
Fire away, KB.
What is your greatest strength?
Sniping.
Greatest weakness?
Work too hard, always running up the scoreboard.
How many games are there in the PSP library?
Over 500.
Name the best PSP game under $10.
SOCON, Fire Team Bravo.
Favorite snack?
I consume a healthy amount of suckers online every day.
Like that answer. When you first contacted me, I was just going to ignore you, but you showed me something today. You're hired. You start on Monday.
Right. Nice to know, my brother.
Okay, I'll see you Monday. I'll bring bagels. Hi, Cindy. Can you bring bagels in on Monday?
Step your game up. Marcus, PSP.
PlayStation.
And that's our look at the Sony PSP. Now if you dug this video, don't forget to hit that like, that subscribe, and that notification bell. That way you get notifications every time I drop new content like this. And if you guys want to help support the channel, consider becoming a member or dropping a super thanks down below. Any kind of support we do get goes right back into the channel and helps produce videos just like the one you watched today. Alright guys, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have a great one. I'll see you on the next video. Peace out, y'all.
Game over, man. It's game over.